Hello there, my name is Gary Sims from Android Authority. Now, Lenovo have an interesting and diverse mobile strategy. The company sells phones under its own Lenovo name. It also sells phones under its Motorola brand because it bought Motorola from Google. And now it's also invested in another company called ZUK. Now, ZUK have just released their first phone, the Z1 or the Z1, and they're not ashamed or even shy at all about the Lenovo investment because on the box it says Lenovo ZUK Z1 or Z1. And anyway, I've got the phone here today and we're going to take a look at it. So if you're ready, let's go. So let's start with the design. If you look at this phone, there's certainly one thing that comes to mind, one phone that comes to mind when I look at it, and that is the Galaxy S3. Here you have the white exterior, you have a button at the bottom, and on the back there is this all plastic back cover with the camera in the middle. Now, ZUK have done one thing at least to differentiate this phone from past phones or even from generic white plastic Chinese OEM smartphones, and that is that it has a metal frame. And the ZUK have gone a long way to explain that it's made with a CNC process, it's made from aviation aluminum and so on and so on. So it does raise the design of this phone a little bit, but if it wasn't for that metal band, this really would look like a generic white Chinese OEM phone. But thankfully there is the metal band, and so that makes things just a little bit better. Now, moving around the phone, you'll see the volume rocker on the right hand side along with the power button. On the left hand side there is the SIM tray. Up at the top you'll find the headphone, 3.5mm headphone jack, and on the bottom there is the microphone hole, there is the speaker grill, and there is the USB Type-C port, which is used for charging and for data transfer. Now, moving on to the display, what you'll find here at the front of this phone is a 5.5-inch Full HD display with a 401 pixel density. It has a brightness of 450 nits at its peak brightness, and ZUK say it has a contrast ratio of 1500 to 1. Generally, the display is of a good quality, it reads well indoors and outdoors, and also because it is an IPS panel, the viewing angles are great. ZUK have also built in some extra features to try and make the most of this display. For example, there's a feature called Live Display. Now, because the phone knows your time zone, it knows what time the sun rises and what time the sun sets, it knows when it's daytime, it knows when it's nighttime, and what the software does if you activate this feature is it changes the color warmth. In the daytime it uses 6500K, a much cooler set of colors, and then during the nighttime it switches to 4500K, a much set of warmer colors. So that's an interesting feature they've put into this phone to try to make the most of the display. One final thing to mention about the screen is that there's a small black border that runs around the edge of the display where the active pixels stop and the display material continues until the bezel. Now, some people find these little black borders around these phones quite distracting. Personally, it doesn't bother me, but if you don't like that, then the ZUK Z1 is not a phone for you. Now let's talk a bit about performance. Inside this phone you'll find a Qualcomm Snapdragon 801. Now that's an interesting choice by ZUK because really that could be considered to be yesterday's technology. It's a 32-bit processor, it's a quad-core processor, and of course it was the processor that we found in many flagship phones. However, today people are maybe more interested in 64-bit processors, quad-core and octa-core, big dot little and so forth. Maybe this was a wise decision by ZUK because I'm sure the 801 processor is probably a bit cheaper now because Qualcomm have moved on to their next generation, and they've even started talking about the next generation of processor after that. That means they could probably get the 801 for a relatively good price. And actually a 32-bit quad-core Snapdragon 801 is going to outperform a low-end 64-bit processor like the Snapdragon 410, for example. So actually I would rather have an 801 in a phone like this rather than a Snapdragon 410 because it's going to bring better performance even though it is a 32-bit processor. Talking of performance, this phone worked absolutely flawlessly. There was no lags, there was no stutters, there was no delays. Everything is smooth. The 801 is still an excellent processor. It's still got a very good GPU in it, and the UI responded all the time. I was able to play games on it without any problems, Asphalt 8 and Riptide and other 3D games and 2D games without any problems whatsoever. Now in terms of actual benchmarks, this phone scored 44,906 on Antutu and managed a 52.8 frames per second on Epic Citadel in high quality mode, and it was actually even faster in high performance mode. So overall, the performance of this phone is more than acceptable. In fact, it's only really just one step or two steps below what a flagship phone would be able to produce today. So let's move on to the hardware. What do we find in this phone? Well, I've already mentioned it's got the quad-core Snapdragon 801. That's backed up by 3 GB of RAM. It also comes with 64 GB of internal storage. Now 64 GB of internal storage is the only option available for this phone. There's no 16 GB, there's no 32 GB, it's 64 GB, and actually that's a really good choice by ZUK. And also it's a good choice because they haven't included an SD card. Now that means that of course if you had 32 or maybe even 16, the use of an SD card would maybe be quite important. But at 64 GB, that's probably not so bad. So good choice there by ZUK. Now with a full HD display, with an 801 processor, it's going to need a good battery, and this phone packs an excellent battery. It's got a 4,100 milliamp hour battery, 4,100 milliamp hour battery, and I've really tested this and it is an excellent battery. Now I did all of my testing, that was all of the testing for this video, that was GPS testing, installing app, performance testing, game testing, everything I needed to do. I just charged this phone once. And over a period of 40 hours, I managed to get 6 hours of on-screen time and 35% of the battery life still remained. 6 hours of on-screen time over a 40-hour period, that's 2 nights for a 40-hour period, and 35% of the battery life is still remaining. This is an excellent battery in this phone, and well done to ZUK for putting such a good battery in this device. Another important thing inside of this phone is the fingerprint reader. The fingerprint reader is here inside of the home button. Now it's an excellent fingerprint reader. It is quick, it's reliable. In fact, I don't think I've had any misreads of my fingerprint in the whole time that I've been using it. And it works in a very similar fashion to, say, the Galaxy S6 or the Note 5. You have to place your finger on the button for it to be read, and if you want to wake and unlock the device, you either have to wake it using the power button and then place your finger on the home button, or you can actually press the home button, keep your finger on the fingerprint reader, and in about a second the phone will wake and unlock all in one go. Unfortunately, the speaker on the Z1 is average at best. It isn't that bad, however it lacks any kind of depth and the sound can be quite tinny. Here's an example so you can see what I mean. The situation is partially alleviated by the inclusion of the Audio FX app, which adds an equalizer with various settings like rock, folk, classic, normal, and so on. So here's another sample with the equalizer switched on. Like many of the next generation of smartphones, ZUK has opted to include a USB Type-C port on the Z1. I think this is a good move, particularly in terms of marketing and future-proofing. However, ZUK have also been quite pragmatic in its choice of USB cable. It doesn't supply a double-ended USB cable, but rather a cable with a USB Type-C connector at one end, which plugs into the phone, and a normal standard A plug at the other end, which can connect to your, in quotes, normal USB port on your computer or any other charger. And while we're talking about chargers, the supply charger for the Z1 is fairly standard at 5 volts and 2 amps. So let's talk a bit about the camera. Inside the ZUK One, you'll find a 13 megapixel Sony-based sensor that is behind a 5-element lens and has an aperture of f2.2. On the front, you'll find a more vanilla 8 megapixel camera for taking selfies. Now, I've been testing the camera for a little while, and outdoors the pictures are really quite good. When there's lots of sunlight, when there's good colours, there's really good pictures are taken, low levels of noise, good level of exposure, the colours seem bright and vibrant, but yet not unrealistic. Now the indoor colours are a bit different, the indoor pictures are a bit different, a little bit of noise starts to creep in. However, if you've got natural light coming in through a window or you've got good indoor lighting, the indoor pictures are certainly above average. The only place where the camera starts to fall down is when you're taking low light pictures. Now, to be honest, the camera does try its very best to make the scene seem as bright as possible, to seem as luminous as possible. However, to do that, lots of noise is introduced into the picture. Now, I recommend you take a look at the written companion to this video. You'll find that on the Android Authority website, and there I've posted quite a few pictures, samples that I've taken with the camera. And particularly if you look at some of those pictures, you can see the difference between the indoor and the outdoor pictures, the low noise pictures and the more noisy pictures. Please go and check that out. You'll see the kind of pictures that this camera can take. Let's just talk briefly about the camera app. It's actually the standard cyanogen camera app that comes with all cyanogen firmwares. It's the same one as one you can download from the Google Play Store. It's a pretty good camera app. It allows you to do things like HDR and panorama. It can do video, of course, and take stills. There's some live filters that can be applied that apply actually directly onto the screen while you're lining up your shot. It's overall a pretty good camera. If you've used it on other cyanogen firmwares, then you'll know exactly how it is. And so let's talk about the software that comes with the phone. The phone doesn't come with stock Android, it actually comes with Cyanogen OS 12.1. Now 12.1 is based on Android Lollipop 5.1.1, but it does bring some extra features to the table. Now those extra features include a theme store, include extra improvements in privacy. There's the ability to add on-screen buttons, even though this device actually has capacitive keys. There is some replacement. Some of the default apps have been replaced. For example, the email app and the calendar app have been replaced by apps from Boxer, which you could also download from the Google Play Store if you wanted them just for your particular phone. And of course, there are some other neat features, like there's one I particularly like, which is double tap to sleep. Now, a lot of phones have got double tap to wake, and in fact this phone has a double tap to wake, but there's also a double tap to sleep. If you double tap on the status bar, the phone goes to sleep, which I think is a great feature. Of course, Cyanogen is verified by Google, which means ZUK have been able to put all of Google's apps onto this phone, including the Google Play Store, Google Hangouts, YouTube, and all of the other Google services. And there we have it, the ZUK Z1 or Z1, depending on what part of the world you're from. At the moment, it's just gone on sale to the international market. You can get it from eBay in Spain and eBay in France for a special introductory price of €280. There's going to be a fairly short sale period for this, maybe just for a week or two, and after that the phone will return to its normal RRP of €375. So if you fancy getting yourself a ZUK 1, now is the time to go and pick one up. Well, my name's Gary Sims from Android Authority. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up. Also, don't forget to subscribe to Android Authority's YouTube channel. Above me here, you'll find links to subscribing to our channel and also to some social media links for my personal social media and for Android Authority social media. Also, don't forget to check out the other Android Authority videos that are linked at the side of this video here. And please do tell me what you think about the ZUK 1 in the comments below. And as for me, I'll see you in my next video.